No! God, please, no! No!
2 years on YouTube. This is 4. So take this out. More than 100 videos and we're stuck again reviewing a Marvel movie. How is that even possible? I think a year ago I was reviewing Eternals and now we're reviewing Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Perfect timing? Who knows? Who knows? As you've probably seen, I've made a new intro to this channel here. It was getting a bit old and I think that also I made so many videos that I could definitely improve that kind of montage. My editing techniques have improved so much and now I can be 100% myself, and you can see that through the intro, I'm pretty sure.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
We are here today in our 2-year celebration video to talk about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I'm gonna try to keep it spoiler free in the beginning of the video and then we'll head into spoilers because honestly it's a movie that lasts 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's on the really long side of Marvel movies and there is a lot to discuss because this movie is trying to do so many things at the same time. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's the classic Marvel thing that we've seen over and over again. The screenwriting mistakes, the pacing mistakes that they do with their films, and we'll try to unwrap all of that. First of all, did I enjoy it? I really enjoyed it. I saw it last week on opening night and I was really surprised to see that there was no queue outside my theater. And it's really weird because usually I have to wait at least like 40 minutes in front of the cinema, queuing in the cold because people love Marvel movies so much. But they opened up everything and everyone just came in slowly. And I was wondering, is this gonna be a box office bomb? Is this gonna be a huge success? I didn't know for like maybe 30 minutes or so until the cinema was completely packed. And I was looking around to see whether it was mostly like a black audience or a white audience because that's something that I noticed when it comes to The Woman King as well. Literally 70% of the theater was filled in by French black people and it was interesting to notice that kind of trend, of course, to just realize who actually goes to see these films and what drives audiences.
In the telling of this story, we were all able to honor him together.
It was really moving to come back to Wakanda and for us to be able to do it with a sense of celebration.
I'm really glad that I was in the theater like that, mostly because of course this is a movie that is really emotional because of Chadwick Boseman's death back in 2020. It was a complete surprise. It was really stunning for everyone involved, whether the people who were working on the films, Marvel fans themselves, or even the black community, because Black Panther was like such a huge film for them and a huge icon and a huge instant classic as well.
I think he was not overwhelmed, but very surprised and somewhat taken aback by the amount of love. It ceased to become just about how well he inhabited the role and all that stuff. It's become part of our culture just as a symbol.
This welcome is one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced.
Because we don't really get to see black superheroes on the big screen that often, so it was important, of course. And I was actually really upset by his death as well, mostly because he always seemed to be such a just wonderful human being. There is a moment in this film here where they basically show a small kind of like flashback montage with scenes of him, and just by looking at his eyes and by looking at the way that he smiles at other people, he was such a positive kind of energy within the MCU. It really reminded me of Captain America if he wasn't like really meddled with all the kind of political and conspiracy stuff that was built within Winter Soldier and future films. Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther was just an incredibly nice person, and he was the best of them at the end of the day, even though he was almost kept as a secondary character within the Infinity War saga.
We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe.
Yeah, he would want us to just inspire the world.
I felt really attached to that character specifically because, well, they did a really good work when it comes to setting him up, when it comes to surrounding him with really strong side characters, which in this movie here automatically become the main character. And that's something that I really enjoyed when it comes to this film here. The main characters are mostly women, and this film here is mostly led by black women. And it was incredibly refreshing, it was incredibly nice. Of course, it reminded me once again of the Woman King. So if you love the Woman King, I'm pretty sure you're gonna love Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Incredibly performances, of course, by Angela Bassett, and the actresses were playing Shuri and Nakia. Even though Nakia comes towards almost the third act of this film, which is kind of weird, but I want to leave my nitpicks for later on in the videos. I want to focus on the really good because there is a lot in this movie here.
I'm just so grateful and blessed to be a part of this. The actors were filled with emotion and passion.
I am queen of the most powerful nation, and my entire family is gone!
First of all, the way that they addressed Chadwick Boseman's death, I thought it was incredibly well handled. It's done quite fast. Actually, the first act of this movie, it's really fast paced and it's moving from one scene to the next. And it could be really hard for some people if you're not really attached to the Black Panther franchise, or if you don't really care for Chadwick Boseman as an actor. But I think that Marvel did the best that they could with the situation that they were handled. And at the end of the day, this film almost like mutated into a reflection on grief and how it affects people and how it pushes them to the limits and how it can create other tensions within family members, within friendships, but also very important political tensions with other countries.
They came from the water. They had superhuman strength.
He's coming for the surface world.
That can't be good.
One thing that I loved about this film, it's the way that it looks and the way that they're trying to introduce new lore. I loved the first Black Panther because it felt so incredibly fresh and different from everything else. And I feel like this movie does that same thing when it comes to the character of Namor and when it comes to the culture that he represents. And I really loved when they were playing with those themes. And I feel like this movie also expands on the theme of neo-colonialism and Western countries trying to appropriate themselves of resources, trying to exploit countries in new ways, of course, without the need of actually invading them. And of course, it was interesting, but I felt that the movie didn't really push that message to the absolute max. And this has to do with the fact that this is a Marvel movie at the end of the day. So even though it can hint us at some kind of like human complexity, at the end of the day, it's still a blockbuster. It's made by the US, so you cannot be 100% critical of the US entirely. So there is that problem, of course. So if you're expecting a movie, what is a movie? If you're expecting a movie that is entirely subversive, this is not it. This is still a Marvel movie, even though it's definitely one of the most emotionally impactful Marvel movies I've seen in a really long time.
You got some nerve! You got some nerve! Ask me why I walk around with attitude. 400 years I was born to be mad at you. The dirt, the mud, we was set to succeed. The Black Panther lives!
Maybe since Marvel's Eternals, which I really enjoyed, and I can actually link you to a video that I made exactly a year ago where I was basically telling out all the YouTubers, all the reviewers who were wrong about Eternals when it comes to its potential. And all the things I said about Eternals actually can fit Black Panther Wakanda Forever. The direction is really strong, the music is incredibly strong. There are some moments where there are just some really tiny, like almost silent moments, and then you can hear a guitar slowly fading in. It almost reminded me of The Road to El Dorado and those kind of themes. It was just really well handled. Even the most silent moments really worked for me, and this didn't really sound or even look like a standard Marvel movie, and it didn't even look like things like the original David Ayer's Suicide Squad, where they just put one pop song after the next.
We're the Suicide Squad.
Even though there are artists who actually made songs for this movie here, it didn't feel like just a compilation. It didn't just feel like someone put a random playlist on and just used those moments as a soundtrack. There is an actual soundtrack for this movie and I really appreciated that. I love the cinematography, of course, even though there are a couple of moments which I found incredibly dark. Do you remember the episode of House of the Dragon where our two main characters, I think it's Daemon and Rhaenyra, they are on the beach and it's incredibly dark and everybody was complaining about how you couldn't see anything? Yeah, we have at least 2 or 3 sequences which are like that and that I didn't really enjoy. I mean, if you can't like see a movie properly at the theater, which is like the best environment to see a movie, it's kind of weird, right? So those scenes, I think they should definitely be changed, maybe in a 4K version or like in a remastered version. They should like bring the exposure up because like I could barely see people's faces. Having said that, I love how Wakanda now feels a lot more lived in. We actually get to meet a lot of just normal people going through their lives, while in the first movie it actually felt like a very kind of like military country. It felt very idyllic, but at the same time it didn't really feel lived in. It felt very empty, and that's what I loved about this movie here. It makes us love Wakanda as a place where people are living instead of just a place that could exist potentially.
Hey, I'm trying to study.
Our fridge is a portal to Wakanda.
Okay.
And of course, how they shoot Wakanda and how they shoot Namor's landscapes and the places where he is, basically, they're completely different. And I'm pretty sure that this movie will be up there fighting against Avatar 2, mostly when it comes to all the underwater sequences that they shot. I really loved how this doesn't look like Aquaman at all because the water is really murky because we end up going really, really deep underwater. So you can't really see everything, but at the same time, it feels really lived in once again. So we are introduced to a new culture, but at the same time it doesn't feel like they're just pointing at it and then moving on with the plot. Actually spend some time there and it's incredibly well handled, and thanks to that, of course, we understand where Namor is coming from and why he loves and wants to protect his people so well. Before we add into spoilers, for me Black Panther Wakanda Forever is a recommendation. It's really a beautiful film. It's a really emotional film. It has a couple of pacing problems, but at the end of the day it's a really good second movie in a franchise, and I'm pretty sure it's also one of the most original and fresh MCU franchises that we've gotten in the last few years, so it is a recommendation. Now let's go into spoilers and tear this movie apart. No, I'm kidding. I mean, this movie is not bad at all, but there are a couple of things which really annoyed me, which could have improved this movie so much. First of all, why are there white people in this movie? I'm actually asking, like I'm not being weird. There are a couple of sequences which are taking place in the US with the Martin Freeman character that we met a couple of years ago, and they're so boring. They're really boring looking. Once again, they try to recreate those kind of like action chase sequences that we see all the time within the MCU, especially the low budget part of the MCU, and they're just boring and I don't want to look at them. During those scenes we are introduced to Riri Williams as well, aka Ironheart, who will get a spin-off series next year, and even within those scenes, just because everything is shot in complete darkness at night and she's literally flying around on a Mark 1 version of her Iron Man suit, we literally can't see anything. We don't get to see the details, so we don't even get to appreciate her creations as a scientist. So it was incredibly weird. I felt like if that scene was taking place maybe at, not at dawn, but like in those moments where the light starts going down but you can still see some things, because it just made for an incredibly boring scene to look at.
Hey, put it down, put it. You'll hurt yourself. Come on.
It's all right, princess. Small girl. I am going to give you 2 options. You can come to Wakanda, conscious or unconscious.
And of course that subplot doesn't even lead to anything. I mean, kind of felt like forced tension. They wanted us to feel like the US might bomb Wakanda at one point or another. Of course it was expanding the theme that I was talking about before when it comes to Americans trying to exploit resources and pretending to go to diplomatic ways, but at the same time like sending secret agents to do the dirty job for them. So that was incredibly interesting, but I think it should have stopped there. We didn't really need to go to the US because it always looks the same. It's always boring. There are so many dialogues in between characters that I don't care about and they don't really lead anywhere at the end of the day. It was a bit of a shame, and maybe like Ryan Coogler felt forced to put those scenes in because at the end of the day it is an American movie and they need to set it up for future movies so that it fits in within the MCU as well. If we want to talk about Namor, I really liked him. The actor who is playing him is incredible.
Who are you?
I have many names. My people call me Kukunkan, but my enemies call me Namor.
You could really sense a lot of emotions when you looked at his eyes. He was a very sympathetic character at the end of the day. Just because of the performance, he actually reminded me a lot of Chadwick Boseman. And I really liked the flashbacks that gave us a glimpse of what happened to him and how his entire people was basically created, his civilization started. And it was just really beautiful to look at. And it was really interesting. It really reminded me of the best things that I like from Marvel's Eternals. So setting up those really ancient civilizations and pushing everything together with the classic kind of like science fiction superhero stuff that we are accustomed to when it comes to the MCU.
But in this big family, you feel part of. When I arrived to this big monster, Hollywood, Marvel movies, I was surprised in the best way possible that there was a family there. And that family, the Black Panther family, was waiting for us.
One thing that I wanted to address in the spoiler part of this video is mostly Namor and his motivations when it comes to doing what he wants to do. He wants to invade the surface world and he uses as an excuse the fact that the Americans are starting to mine vibranium and they're getting a bit too close to his people and to their city. Even though I'm pretty sure they will never be able to find it because it's so incredibly tedious to get there. It was a bit of a stupid message, and this is where I feel like the script would have needed a bit of a rework. I've heard, for example, that Namor was always meant to be in the second movie of this franchise here and was supposed to be fighting Chadwick Boseman. So he felt a bit out of character that he would want to just invade the surface world and kill everyone.
Gentlemen, I have a plan.
And also I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't be able to do it just because he doesn't seem to have like such a strong army at the end of the day, even though he seems to be able to control water and he has those weird water bombs, and it looks like sometimes his people are like immortal and other times they can die. Like this is something that the movie doesn't really explain that well. What are the rules? What is this magic system here? Can they be killed or can they not be killed? Because in the moment on the bridge they're literally stabbed by Okoye, but they stand up and run away. But in other moments of the film, in other action sequences, people are actually killed. Some of them are actually killed, so I don't really understand what the rules are when it comes to how to kill these people, and they didn't really address that coherently. But if we go back to the message I was talking about before, I felt like they were trying to add once again more false tension, because of course if the conflict was only in between Namor and Wakanda, then maybe this film would have felt a bit low stakes, even though I really don't think so, because we like Wakanda, and once we get to know Namor and his people, we like them as well. So there is no need for him to be like, oh, I'm so evil, I'm gonna be destroying everything. Yep, that's me. And I bet you're wondering why I decided to make such a controversial Hitler reference, considering that we're talking about minorities wanting to get back at their colonizers. But I think it was kind of appropriate because anyone who threatens a global genocide probably deserves its own controversial joke about it. Am I right? If I'm not, I hope I don't get cancelled. Oh, I'm so evil, I'm gonna be destroying everything on the surface world, wahahaha, evil laugh, you know? It felt unnecessary. I have no idea why they added that kind of weird motivation to his character, because he didn't really look that consumed by rage and thirsting for vengeance that much at the end of the day. Not as much as Shuri herself, because she lost so many people so quickly, so it made more sense for her. I really liked the way that they addressed her character development and how how she deals with grief. I love that they actually built a very different Black Panther character with this film here. It does not look like Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther at all. He looks like a more impulsive Black Panther, maybe a Black Panther that is more like rageful, and a Black Panther that is more immature at the end of the day. And it's interesting because it would have been incredibly easy to just recycle all the personality traits that T'Challa had and push them into Shuri, and that's it. We would have had the same Black Panther, but it's not what the movie does, and I think it does that really, really well.
Because it was so raw to come back into the world that we know and love, the characters that we know and love without our brother, and just to give us that anchoring that we needed to know that this is gonna be okay. Diving into that world, man, it's again another opportunity to inspire, another opportunity to shed light on issues, on a culture that's been hidden. You know, I've learned so much in the discovery of beautiful culture of indigenous people.
At the end of the day, for a film that is called Black Panther Wakanda Forever, it just has like 20 minutes of Black Panthering around, which is a bit of a shame. And once again, third act problem when it comes to the MCU. And we have to address this because I think it's so fucking stupid. Who had this idea and why? So we are introduced to the idea that basically Namor is more powerful because of the water that he absorbs, that his skin absorbs. And I suppose that his people are exactly the same at the end of the day, even though they don't have superpowers like him. But they do change like skin color when they get out of the water. So it makes sense for them as well that maybe they would be weaker if they were further and further away from the water. So why the fuck would you create a trap for them on an incredibly narrow boat in the middle of the ocean? You're literally surrounded by water and you're relying on like a weird sonar weapon, which as we can see can be destroyed incredibly easily because there's no one that can protect it at the end of the day. There is no protection for that machine underwater. And then of course the boat will get stormed by everywhere and you will die. You will 100% die. You can have as many people as you want. There is no way that you can survive that because they just need to push you off the boat into the water and you're dead because these people are fish people. Come on.
Why? 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 Why?
So that was incredibly stupid, and it was so weird then that we got our first like look at the Black Panther and Shuri's performance as a superhero into a scene that was just incredibly ridiculous. That's a classic MCU problem. I really enjoyed, for example, the fight that she has with Namor when they actually end up on the desert, but I found it weird as well that when she was on the spaceship, she was just standing there, not trying to stop him while he was literally destroying the spaceship. It made no sense at all. Why don't you try to fight him? Why don't you try to like push him aside so that he doesn't do that, so that it gives you time to get to the desert? That made no sense. It was weird just when you have people standing around who are not doing anything just because the plot doesn't need them to do anything, because at the end of the day the spaceship will crash and they will still end up on the desert, right? Another thing that I didn't really like is Riri Mach 2 Iron Man suit, which is the most Power Ranger looking shit ever.
What sound is that?
A dinosaur.
A what?
Dinosaur.
It's a what?
Dinosaur.
Make the sound again. Oh, you talking about them things from Jurassic Park?
It actually reminded me of Metroid as well, but not in a good way. It looked so incredibly weird, and I'm so glad that at the end of the day, Shuri's like, we're gonna keep the suit, you can't bring it to the US. I'm like, thank God. At least we have like an eject button for another suit that maybe will look much better. I don't know if it looks exactly like in the comics, but you have to admit that it looks incredibly weird, and I just couldn't take it seriously. I did enjoy the other suits, the one that Okoye was wearing, for example, but at the end of the day, they're such good fighters that I don't really like the fact that they just hide their body behind suits. It doesn't really give them a big advantage, so I have no idea why they decided to do that. Maybe just to up the stakes, because Namor's people seem to be so strong, but at the end of the day, if you go fighting them on their own fighting ground, yeah, it's stupid. It's incredibly stupid, so I just don't get it. I have no idea why they decided to do that. I really like the parallels that they're doing between Shuri and Killmonger. He's the person that she actually sees once she consumes the herb, and she's not expecting that at all. And it was incredibly interesting because I love the idea of having tortured main characters who are almost like cursed by their own pain and by their own grief. Even though they act normal, even though they act like they are in control, at the end of the day, inside, it's not what's exactly happening. And we really see that, and we really developed that with the character of Shuri, and it was really well handled.
Maybe we can still heal you.
Why? So you could just lock me up? Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships.
because they knew death was better than bondage.
We thought until the very last second that she was actually a good person, but as we see in the film, she actually isn't. I really love the scene where she goes like Wakanda forever and the spaceship just blurts out a lot of fire and burns Namor almost to death. That was such an incredible scene. It was really beautiful. And when it comes to the action sequences, I think most of them really work. I love the whole weird like pressure water bombs that they use, and the slow motion with that effect works out really well. I really love the invasion of Wakanda as well, mostly because they show how powerful they are and how easily they can invade the country using their powers, so using water, and how much it's gonna disorient everyone and they will not be able to fight at the same level basically. I really loved the post-credit scene as well. I was almost tearing up. This is a good post-credit scene. It didn't really feel like they were trying to build another like young Avenger member, because people have been joking around about the fact that there are so many new children being introduced in the MCU and slowly we're going into the Young Avengers, right? It didn't really feel like that. It felt incredibly well done, and it made sense even more for Nakia to stay back when it comes to everything else that happened, because she was taking care of this secret child. And everything was sold really well to me, mostly because of Shuri's performance and how she reacted to all of it. It was really nice. It was a really quiet moment, and for once it didn't really feel like the MCU was just shoving something down her throat, which would be important in the next phase of the MCU.
I have someone here that I'd like you all to meet. This is my son, Scar.
What a story, Mark.
Yeah, you can say that again.
It was nice, and I really need to applaud everyone who was working on this film, because at the end of the day they delivered on a film that doesn't really feel like a superhero film. This film actually felt like a real film. Every single scene had emotional weight. The dialogues were interesting. It was not burdened down by a shit ton of humor and comedy, which is basically what destroyed Thor: Love and Thunder. It was just a really well written script with a couple of mistakes which could have made it even better, but at the same time this movie had so many different pieces of the puzzle that needed to be stacked on top of each other that it was almost impossible to create a perfect movie, in my opinion. That is basically it. Those are all the thoughts that I have when it comes to Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of it. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's probably up there among the 10 or 15 best MCU movies. It's not better than its predecessor, mostly because the first movie felt so fresh and so incredibly well paced that it's impossible to surpass, especially when you have to introduce so many new things but also deal with so much trauma and do both of them well. And so as we get to the end of this video, I decided I'd show you my Marvel Faithful ranking, and as you can see here, I decided also to put all the Marvel MCU series, which a lot of people decided to forget about, and even Werewolf by Night, which was an incredible special at the end of the day. For me, Wakanda Forever actually ranks quite high, mostly because of its emotional resonance and basically all the things I talked about like literally 20 minutes ago. But I gave a bit more of an edge to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness just because I think it was a way more fun and creative movie when it comes to the special effects, and WandaVision was just a perfectly well executed concept. Well, let me know what your ranking is down in the comments as well. It could be interesting to compare and contrast our own very subjective lists. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every single like that you drop will go in the memory of Chadwick Boseman, whose last performance I think was Spike Lee's The Five Blood, which was a really good film and I recommend it as well. I'm Patrick and this is Torn Apart.
It's fun to watch just what it means to people. At times, in my head, I'll be like, well, what does this do for the world? Like, actually, what is it? You know, is it actually valuable in this climate? And I have to say, yes, it actually is. Not because it makes people escape. I think when done right, it gives people hope. I found that it means a lot.
Two years of YouTube, yeah. 2 years on YouTube, yeah. 2 years on YouTube, yeah. 2 years.
Okay, I love you. Bye-bye.